What's up, everybody? We are back for another episode of Digital Banter Live. Today, we are talking about building a paid media program. Now, as everybody knows from our LinkedIn content and James just spouting off all the time on this podcast, we're two paid media guys. So we've seen how it's been done over the years. We have our pros, we have our cons, we have our kind of thoughts on the process, right? But we figure we bring in the big guns and have our guest Silvio Perez from AdConversion join us and talk about it on today's episode. Silvio, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be in here, and I feel like we're going to nerd out really hard.
So, James, I'm going to kick this over to you. How the hell did you even get connected with Silvio to start with?
Well, a couple different ways, but the way I learned about AdConversion was honestly like looking for training resources for our team. I know being agency side, one of like the most difficult things that we deal with is like hiring, kind of like bringing on new people. And anybody in the digital marketing space probably gets this, like, you hired somebody 3 months ago and you brought on a new person, like everything's completely different than it was 3 months ago. So from a training resources perspective, I can't tell you how many times that we've tried to essentially build what Silvio is building and just given up on it because it's just easier to train people as it comes in and bring them in on the nuances. And I think that's like, honestly, because we focus so much on the technical side. And like, I think the piece that we're going to dive into today quite a bit is the strategy side, because when all of that technical stuff changes all the time, strategy doesn't change that much. And I think that that's where, the work that Silvio's been doing has been super helpful. I was joking before the call, like he's officially part of our onboarding process with his free training. There's a couple other people in there too. Shout out Miles McNair. We use some of your stuff. But definitely been a huge help for me. And that's how I figured out what he was doing. I also looked at metadata and stuff like that. So.
All right, Silvio. So give us a rundown around AdConversion, what it is, what it's all about.
Yeah, definitely. So essentially, AdConversion is a digital advertising academy. We teach B2B marketers how to scale paid ads with free advertising courses taught by the world's best practitioners. So the vision is that AdConversion can become the go-to place in the world to learn how to run ads. So there is an actual place dedicated to give you a learning experience for your vertical. So, we're 100% focused on B2B. And the idea is we will have these courses that are designed not only based on topic and the industry, but also based on sequence. So we've kind of broken it out based on different tiers. So it's like foundations, launch, optimize, and scale. And then within each tier, there's different courses. And the vision is whenever somebody asks the question, I want to learn how to run ads for B2B, where do I go? It's, oh yeah, you got to go check out adconversion.com. And that's essentially at a high level.
So does that mean you have your SEO humming along yet or no?
We just got it off the ground. It's interesting how when how the vision drives the mission, you hear all that and you kind of work backwards. So originally I was consulting, even before metadata, and I was just running ads, was the ad guy, just creating YouTube videos, working with clients, and had a lot of fun doing that for a while. But fast forward to today with AdConversion, I realized I'm like, well, if we're going to become the go-to resource, we're going to create a destination and really a brand bigger than myself is really what I'm doing. Then I'm like, well, then that means from a content perspective, the website must become valuable in itself. And I have this whole thing around, getting ranked is like table stakes. Like, of course we want to get ranked. It's table stakes. But really the goal with every piece that we put out, at least the mentality that I have approaching it, is how do we create content so good that actually gets bookmarked so that we are a resource and people have a reason to keep coming back again in the future. And I have this whole content strategy like outlined and like literally in my notebook here. I should probably get it on digital. And like the first phase, I think in phases, and the first phase is the blog. So we literally just launched the blog. Probably it hasn't been more than a month. And the first piece that we launched was like 4,000 words on an intro to B2B advertising. It's just this masterpiece with like 20 contributions from other B2B ad experts. And then I just launched our first blueprint, and a blueprint is like very tactical, how to do a certain thing. And it's all around multi-channel B2B retargeting. The thing is 35 pages long. I filmed 10 YouTube videos that I embedded into the blueprint, showing people how to do things. There's visuals, there's diagrams. I mean, it's ridiculous, you know what I mean? And that's the second piece of content. So it kind of ties back to that goal that we're after, right? Of becoming the resource.
It certainly beats a search engine journal or what else? The combination between that and Google Ads help. I mean, that's what like particularly like I'm excited about it. Why I like it is that like you are focused on B2B. I know your vision is much bigger than that, but I mean, you know, Dave Gerhardt says it all the time. Like, there's no school for B2B marketing. Like, there's no school for B2B paid media either, right? I made a joke in my intro video about like Performance Max. Like, there's certain stuff that, you know, others, you know, if you just read basic how-to stuff online, like you're going to be pulled in the wrong direction real fast.
1,000%. Yeah.
I mean, I was going to jump on that train, right? A lot of the content out there is super tactical. It's super in the weeds, you know, whether it's how to or, you know, combining the power of Google search and LinkedIn, like it just runs rampant out there. And one begins to wonder, like, has the proliferation of that content actually watered down the skill set of paid media people to become cookie cutter in their thinking, or, oh yeah, you know, XYZ says this, so I got to do this because this just makes sense for my business. And it just feels like the skill development is kind of broken at this point, Silvio. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
How long is this podcast?
We try for 30 minutes, so rein it in.
Oh man. Yes, 1,000%. This is like, you guys are speaking my love language right now. You know, there's a huge challenge. Is the problem with most ad people is they only know the channels and their thinking is very myopic. They only understand Google Ads, right? This is like where you always have those classic situations where it's like somebody's reporting on quality score to a VP of marketing when he wants to know about pipeline and revenue, right? There's just a complete disconnect. And that's actually why the first course that we launched is all around building a paid media program. And by the way, no one asked me to build this course. Like, when I polled users and I was like, hey, would you like to know what are your biggest pain points? Everyone said Google, LinkedIn, Reddit, and those are like kind of the big three. So why did I build this course? I built this course because it was kind of like, if you don't understand the 10,000 foot view first, when you go into the weeds of the channels of Google or LinkedIn, I think of them as like tools on your tool belt, you know, and you can, depending on the job, you might need a different tool. So, but if you don't understand the premise of the job and how to create the plan, the blueprint that you're going to then execute, the tools are kind of just distractions, you know? So 100%, it is a combination of a multitude of things. I think one, it's the problem with the current state of online education, to be frank, you know what I mean? Everyone, especially the average academy, they create courses to maximize profits. So they'll just create a bunch of courses for volume. They'll keep it broad for mass appeal. They'll stuff as much info as possible. They'll sell to everyone versus to like the people who will benefit most. And then they just repeat the cycle, you know? And yeah, and no one, it's like the unsexy thing that nobody wants to talk about, but it's key. And at the end of the day, like, coming from somebody that worked in ad tech, like when I was at Metadata, if the only value you bring to the table as a performance marketer is understanding Google Ads or LinkedIn, you're not going to have a job in 5 years. Like, that's just the truth. And we knew that years ago, you know what I mean? It's only getting accelerated today. I tell my former team, and then I guess you can call it my current team, I always say, you know, the people who will still have a job 5 years from now in this space are the ones that are the strategists, the ones that know how to think and then leverage the tools, however they might advance, to then execute on their behalf.
Yeah, I mean, I think Task Bober just called it out in the chat, in the comments. Great, right? Channel expertise is not the same as marketing expertise.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think the other thing too, I mean, James, I mean, if you look back over our tenure together, right? I mean, I hired you back in the day, And when we think about like the types of training that we've done for our own agency side, we've always found the best success with that hands-on learning mentality, right? Great, let's teach somebody, but then you got to go do it. You have to get the assignments to actually practice it hands-on, because that's the best way you learn at the end of the day. You, rather than watching all these videos and things like that and not being able to apply it to your own business, you got to go do it, right? And it's rinse and repeat, and that's how you build the skill set. But also on top of that, that's where you start to have those conversations that are like not necessarily theoretical, but more trying to connect the dots. Like, okay, so you did it this way. You got still to the end goal, but why do you do it this way? And start to poke and prod at that strategic thinking to get more marketing expertise out of those channel conversations.
Yeah, when I was at Metadata, one of the things that I did was build the performance marketing team. They're essentially like the internal agency. And I was really fortunate to go through the experience of having to hire people that were extremely junior. I mean, I had one person that didn't even know what cost per click was. You know, I'm talking about like as junior as it gets, you know what I mean? And fast forward, those people ended up managing millions of dollars in ad spend for different clients. Some of them actually gone off to do their own agencies. Some of them are working like full-time now as like performance marketing managers. Some of them are consulting. And with all of those people, we started with the thinking, the strategy, the why, and by teaching them that first and then getting into the channels, things started to click, and then they can connect dots. And that was a huge insight for me of like, unfortunately, because this doesn't exist, we learn by learning the channel first, which is kind of is what it is. There's no better solution at the moment. And because of that, we have this tunnel vision thinking. But
so one thing that I'm not a big fan of in the space, and you see it a lot with like different agencies trying to position themselves as different, right? So everybody has like a different framework, right? You have the demand gen people, the lead gen people, the brand people, the performance marketing people, like, and everybody has like a different spin. So I know us as an agency, like, I never want to be like a demand gen agency. I don't want to be a lead gen agency, because you pigeonhole yourself in a strategy that may work for a short period of time and then not work later. And like, we end up having to pivot with clients all the time. So my question from a strategy perspective, like, what are some of the things that you take in initially, working with a client, working with a brand, to help decide like what framework is going to work best for them? Or if it needs to be completely custom, which most of the time it does.
Yeah, there's a few things, and they're not even paid related. It's just like business objectives. Number one, what's the goal? What are we trying to go after? How soon do we need it? What's their current state of reporting and tracking? Who are they going after? What are the markets we're interested in penetrating? So really getting clear on the product marketing side first, on the who and the what. And then the cool thing about the scale framework specifically that we built and that we use in the Building a Paid Media Program course is that it can be customized regardless of the business type, which is really cool. So it's very versatile. So in the sense of, if we have a product-led company, we can adjust the stage slightly to account for them versus a sales-led company. So using the same framework, we can then take the client's goals, their priorities, and then start to map them against that framework as like our canvas, as the first step of building their strategy along their paid program.
What about through the lens of like, maybe I'm the head of marketing a brand and it's more about strengthening my existing program versus, let's say, a startup where maybe I'm marketer number one and only lone marketer, and I'm trying to get this thing off the ground. Like, how does that framework or mindset change for those different kind of situations?
I would say the difference is you'd first do an audit. So you'd first have to audit your existing structure. From there, you would then, because the challenges with most people is they don't realize they're only penetrating one stage. So for example, this is one of my favorite things about the scale framework, is like it shows you all of the different areas that you can have an impact. And then within the scale framework, we use the 5 stages model. So number one is you have to audit where you are right now. And from there, you can then map it against the 5 stages model and see what's the gap. So for example, maybe all we're ever doing is capture. we can do create, we can do accelerate, we can do revive, we could do expand. Those are 4 other stages we haven't even thought about that we could potentially put dollars against to make an actual impact in terms of investment. So I would say number 1 is learning through the scale framework. You can understand your strategy first, like audit that, then go through your configuration, which is all around your reporting and your measurement. Then from there, you can audit your process around assembling campaigns, which is what the A stands for. Then L is around learning. So do you have a process in place for learning? And then finally is around expansion. Do you have a process in place around expansion? Do you have a process in place around securing budget from stakeholders, experimenting, and building a library of learnings?
I think that expansion part is key because while it lives at the end of the framework, it really starts at the very beginning. Because, I mean, how many times have all 3 of us had conversations with a client or a brand where it's like, oh yeah, we just want to test out and pilot Google search. Well, okay, great. That's one little channel out of the entire possibility that exists out there. So like what's the end goal here, right? What's the triggering event for trying Google search? You want more leads? You want more bottom of funnel kind of intent driven stuff? Like it's less about the channel at the end of the day. It's more about the strategy and the end goal, to your point, Sylvia, of what does that expansion looks like that hits the actual business bottom lines.
Yeah, 1,000%. We always say take the 10,000 foot view first.
Yeah.
Before we get our foot on the ground.
So I don't know, let's dive deeper into this because this is a question we get all the time. Advice for small brand. I don't know, they got 3,000 to start budget. They're just starting their paid media program. What are some of the things that they need to have in place? Would you start at the top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel? Like, where would you go?
Yeah. So first and foremost, just taking like a huge zoom out. So the scale framework is the entire process from going from, I have no idea what I'm doing, I've never done this before, to I'm a legend. I'm expanding, I'm scaling across channels. So the framework itself is the process I would walk someone through. So the S stands for strategize. So this person with 3K a month, I would say, all right, fantastic. Let's work together. Let's first figure out your strategy. So then from there, I would use the 5 stages model as the canvas to actually map out the strategy. So I would say, okay, you got 3K a month. We have 5 potential stages we could make an impact. Given your budget, is it realistic for you to be able to hit all 5 stages with 3K? Probably not. And also, given your goal, you said you want to drive demos this month, correct? Okay, well then, like the saying goes, let's not sell a hamburger to somebody who isn't hungry. Let's focus on the people who know they have a problem first, which is the capture stage. So let's convert interest from in-market buyers. Right. So that's kind of like the decision tree in my mind that I would go through and how everything kind of feeds into that. So then from there would be diving even deeper. It's like, okay, now that we understand the stage we're going after, what are the KPIs we will measure? Okay, so you have 3K. How do we know if we're successful or not? I always say to clients, I'm like, are we winning a winnable fight? Like, is this game winnable? Because if it's not, I don't want to play. And I don't think you want to play either. So from there, we understand the stage, we've allocated the budget. Now we need to understand the KPIs from the get-go. I cannot tell you how many times I've made this mistake. Fast forward 3 months. Oh, we're not successful. And I'm like, what do you mean we're not successful? Like this, and this happened, because there's a misalignment of reality and you need to set those expectations. So from here, we will set the KPIs on the leading and the lagging side. So leading KPIs, what are the first things that we can get insights on really quickly within a 7 to 14-day period? Lagging KPIs within a 30 to 90-day period. So for example, with the 3K a month, on the front end, we're going to look at your cost per demo opt-in as an example. On the lagging side, we'll look at pipe to spend generated from these campaigns that we're running. And then from there, we go into the actual channel selection. Okay, what's going to be the best use of that 3K? You only have 3K, so likely it's going to be one channel to start, and you just kind of keep going down that route. But once you have the big outline of like, okay, here's where you start, here's where you end, it then becomes much easier for people, especially if they're not paid ads people, to have a map that they can follow, right? So if they're flying, like I'm in Lisbon right now, I want to go to Lisbon to Miami, I need a flight plan. And the scale framework is your 10,000 foot view on building the program. And then within the strategize stage, we use the 5 stages model to start to build out the actual strategy. And then from there, we go into the next stage once you have your strategy locked in, which is around configuring. And this is, in my opinion, the place that most people need help, not even strategically. It's the configuring, which is all around how do you actually configure the necessary visibility to know if you are heading in the right direction from a reporting perspective. So I always say, like, you could have the greatest advertiser of all time. Like, you could have the Yoda of ads in your ad account managing
You could have
your
James
campaigns.
Kravick, legendary James Kravick.
There's nothing legendary here.
And I promise you, if you had James, Andy, and myself in your account managing your ads, and we don't have the necessary reporting and dashboards, we can't help you. You can't even help yourself. Like, you have to have this, which is why it's the second part of the scale framework. And in the course, we go into like showing people how to build a paid media program. And I feel like with each one of these, like, we could have a whole podcast. But that's the second piece. So that's kind of how I think about it. So like the scale framework is the high level process and the roadmap. And then we start from the S and we work our way to the E.
So let me bring up, I want a common pain point, because I feel like people need to hear this. Like, my question, I'll be direct. Can you work without CRM data?
No, absolutely not. If the goal is capture and we want to drive pipeline and revenue, you are already setting yourself up to fail, because how do you know if pipeline and revenue happen if you can't connect CRM data? It's like, it's illogical, you know?
One of the biggest misses, though. It really is like one of the biggest misses.
Yeah, it's like, I'll give like a side note for the agencies listening and the freelancers, and they're like, I don't know how much to charge. I'm like, well, you don't know how much to charge because you don't understand how much value you're providing. The reason you understand how much value you're providing is because you have no real insight into what you're actually doing. That's a cold pill to swallow, but it's true, you know? And I say that out of love, because like I said that years ago, you know what I mean? And then I realized this, and then I'm like, well, wait a second. Because I tell my team this, it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because at the end of the day, they're going to blame you.
Yeah.
Because most people don't take accountability. You know what I mean? So it's like, I always say, it's like, imagine you knew somebody was going to get cancer in 6 months. You knew, and you love this person. It is your moral obligation to use everything in your power to convince them of the problem that they have and the impending doom that is coming their way. And if they're not willing to do it, then I'm not the right person for you.
I got nothing to go for that.
No, that one's being clipped after this. That's starting with the cancer comment. No, but it's so like it's so true, and I think that's like what Chris Walker used to talk about this a lot. Like, I won't work with you unless you give us CRM data. I will say, like, we're not necessarily in that position. Like, is that my opinion? Yeah, like, you know, it becomes really difficult over time to drive leads or drive demos, and then, like, you know, even like relying on them to give that information back to you, like, it's not the same as just being able to go in and say, like, oh, like, we drove this. I used to love ecom, right? I hate ecom now. I used to love ecom because you could make a change and you could see how many dollars you made the next day. I used to love that. And I would spend way too much time on my ecom accounts because I could go in there and I could be like, oh, I made this much money. I made this much change. In B2B, you could never do that. But now we get access to a lot more back-end data, and like I can go in and be like, oh, we drove like 6 leads today. Like, who are these people? Do they fit the ICP? And then like tracking them through. And it just, honestly, it makes the job more fun too, but you can do much better work because you can realize that you had 50 leads on a terrible ebook download from Nigeria, and that strategy isn't going to work for you, right? And you could just put it to the client right away, right? It makes a huge difference.
100%. And one really hard thing, and like I see the comment by Courtney around how do you get clients to provide the necessary data to build better dashboards, especially if you're working in B2B, it can be really tough to get access to CRM just from a security perspective. And you have to sign like your life away, basically, in agreements to even get the hope of getting access to the CRM. So one really tactical and practical tip I have for you is, instead of you getting direct access to the CRM and getting a direct login where you can get exposed to all the other things that you shouldn't be saying, instead use a shared space. So for example, like with our clients, we use Google Sheets. It's free. It's simple. You can afford Google Sheets, and we just have the data pushed into Google Sheets that the client that we need to build, then visualize it with the dashboards in Google Sheets. And in the course in module 3, not to plug the course, but we have the dashboard that we use in there with clients, and they can just push the data in with no PII, no personally identifiable information. So it's just like create date, opportunity amount, UTM source, the lead source detail, etc. And that's really it. And I'd show you how to build it in module 3 in terms of the specifics.
Another thing I just want to call out here, just to kind of bring this part of the conversation to a closure, is for anybody that wants to dig a little bit deeper into, on the client side, how do you try to get them to give you more of this data? Check out a couple episodes of Digital Banter ago with Tass Bober. We definitely dived into that pretty in depth when she was on the brand side of things, and just kind of how to have those conversations at multiple levels, and also just having that directiveness that we're all talking about of, I can only do so much with what I'm given. So, all right. So Silvio, as we kind of start to bring today's episode towards the closure, I like to ask a question around, and I still have it here. If you were to wave the magic wand, right, what's the one thing that you would change about B2B marketing today?
Oh, that's tough. There's, I can't ask for 3 more wishes.
You get 3 takeaways, so you can use those as like your lifelines, I guess, if you want.
I would say number 1 is to not forget the art. I think B2B, we have a tendency to be infatuated with the science, which is great. But at the end of the day, you can have the most beautiful campaign setup, the most wonderful report in the world, but all your prospects see is the ad in front of them and the offer that they have and the landing page that they're going to, right? If you're using a landing page. So I would really say that folks, sometimes they think too much in a way. Like they think a lot about the things that don't really matter, and then they don't think very much about the things that do. And one of the biggest things that do is you're creative. You know, at the end of the day, like even with the building a paid media program, if you use a scale framework or any other framework for that matter, that's great. Like you have this infrastructure, you have the proper conventions, you have the proper dashboards, reporting, everything. But now it's like, okay, like I always tell my clients, like, let's get the plumbing out of the way as soon as possible. You know, like I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. I want to spend time doing the stuff that's cool, like testing new things and new creatives and thinking about cool ad angles that we can then build awesome integrated campaign ideas around. So I would say that's the number 1 thing is they sweat the details that don't matter, and they don't pay much attention to the ones that do.
I got nothing on that because we hear it every single day. So you nailed on that one. All right. So if you want to use that as your 1 out of 3 actionable takeaways, we'll give you a free pass on that. But give us some actionable takeaways for our listeners today.
Actionable takeaways on things to stop doing in B2B?
In general, go for it.
I would say number 1 is stop using the same creative on all channels and expecting it to perform equally. You need to respect each platform. Each platform, almost think of it as like its own country. It has its own customs, its own people, its own regulations. So one very common example is somebody takes a video that they ran on LinkedIn and Facebook, and then they slap it as a YouTube ad. They put $1,000 behind it, and they're like, "Oh, YouTube ads doesn't work." It's like, no, you're not winning a winnable fight here, you know? So I would say that's 1. So learn the platforms first. I always recommend like becoming a user yourself. So for example, I ran TikTok ads in January of last year, and I really wanted to see, can you reach B2B buyers on a platform like TikTok? But before I actually ran an ad, the first thing I did was I actually use the platform. So I used it, and I used it for, I always say for at least 30 days, like, you know, for 30 days straight. Just be careful you don't develop an addiction, especially to TikTok. But use the platform, understand the nuances. I always say, like, people who are great at creating content organically, you know, it's funny because they kind of like shit on ads people, or like vice versa, like, oh, I grew organically, or, you know, it's like this divided camp, which is like crazy to me. But if you're already doing things great organically, you are a couple steps away of becoming a fantastic advertiser and learning the data side, you know? So I would say that's 1. I'm ranting a lot. But the second thing, actionable takeaway for people is you can't fix what you can't see, which I feel like has been a big theme this episode. But there's really no excuse to not have the proper reporting. And I'm sorry, I just don't have sympathy anymore for, especially for like startups that have raised capital. Me myself now as an entrepreneur, like, you know, very early on, I don't have any venture capital money. I don't have a tenth of a tenth of a tenth of like what other people do, not to compare myself, but I have been able to build a dashboard in Google Sheets to give me some level of visibility, you know? So it's like, there's really no excuse. You accept what you tolerate at the end of the day. And it's very true. And when you are the leader of the ship, you know, the buck stops with you. So if you're a CEO listening to this, a founder, you know, at the end of the day, everything is your fault, even when it's not. So take accountability and make sure that you have the things that you need so that you can be successful. And I would say that's probably the next one. And then the third one is don't get in the habit of checking boxes. What I mean by this is it's very easy to hear something and then just like try it half-assed and then just check the box. It's like, oh, LinkedIn thought leader ads. Let's try that. And then you do it. And then it's kind of like not with real thought or integration with other things, going back to strategy. And of course it doesn't work, or you don't think it works, or whatever the case might be. Or even like with content, we need a blog, let's create content. So we're just gonna start to create content, and it's like very half-assed, and it's like you're better off at being incredible at few things versus doing a lot of things poorly. You know, like the difference between good and great is dramatic. You know, like even producing this first course that's free, like to be able to get it to the level of production that it required, having resources like, for example, our transcripts are proofread for typos. We highlight key points and benefits on them, all of this stuff. And this is a free course, you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm already seeing word of mouth, people referring AdConversion to their friends and things like that. And then on the other hand, I've worked with companies that have millions of dollars in budget and they have content teams, but they don't understand what I'm saying in terms of like committing yourself to mastery, to making things that are truly worthy of shares and referrals and likes. And then they put budget behind it to create demand, and they don't actually get any real traction. And it's like, well, why is that? Inputs and outputs. What is the input here that you're then outputting out there? And if that's wrong, you're not gonna, you know, get the result you're after. So I would say don't fall into that trap of checking boxes. Just because you hear someone say something on LinkedIn today, or ChatGPT this or that, or whatever the newest thing is, like, understand the game you're playing, get obsessed about who you're serving, and just focus on that. And then all these other new things that come up, I'm not saying disregard it, but I'm just saying don't prioritize it right now. Like, look at it, learn about it, and then see how it can integrate into the bigger picture later on.
Perfect.
A huge fan of focusing on a couple things and doing them really, really well. The shiny object thing is very tough sometimes.
Yeah, especially when you're a creative person.
All right, Silvio. So where can people learn more about AdConversion, but also connect and talk to you?
Yeah, visit us at adconversion.com, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Silvio Perez, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, man. It was great having you on today's show. Everybody like, subscribe, check out Digital Banter episodes like I mentioned, but more importantly, go check out AdConversion. As Silvio mentioned, it's free. Until next time, catch you guys later.